Last episode, we talked about what a sustainable teacher work-life balance actually looks like and what it costs when your planning system doesn't support it. And today, I want to close out this series with something that's been sitting underneath every single episode we've done together. A permission. One that I wish someone had given me in year one, and one that, I'll be honest, some of my fellow curriculum coaches are still getting wrong. Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Khristen Massic, a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive, but thrive as a multiple prep teacher. Here it is. One of the most common pieces of advice that curriculum coaches, myself included in this field, still pass along to teachers is this: switch things up so students don't get bored. And I want to say, with full awareness that I work in curriculum and have said versions of this myself, I think that's one of the biggest pieces of planning advice that is actively making teacher workload harder. Not because variety never matters, but because it's being applied to the wrong problem. Here's what I mean. When I finally got curriculum for one of my courses, those Project Lead the Way materials I mentioned back in episode 336, one of my first reactions was that some of it felt dry, repetitive in places, not exactly the most thrilling thing a high school student had ever encountered. And the instinct, the one curriculum coaches reinforce, is to fix that by switching things up. New activity, different format, more variety. But here's what that instinct misses. The architecture slide decks I used early in my career, those were different every time. New slides, new content, new layout, and they were boring. Not because the structure was too consistent, because slides delivering information at passive students is a low engagement experience, regardless of how much you vary it. The structure wasn't the problem. The content inside the structure was the problem. And those are two completely different things with two completely different solutions. Here's what I actually believe after everything in this series. Students don't get bored from consistent structure. They get bored from low quality content delivered inside any structure. And when you confuse those two things, when you start switching up your structures to fix the content problem, you create a new problem on top of the original one, because now your students don't know what to expect. Not every lesson requires re-explanation of how it works. Now your planning requires reinvention instead of refinement. And for a multiple prep teacher already managing more courses than any single planning system was ever designed for, that advice doesn't reduce boredom. It multiplies decision fatigue. Think about the teachers with the strongest classrooms I described in episode 338. The 6th grade hall at the middle school I was leading. Those elementary teachers weren't switching things up constantly. They had tight, repeatable routines. Students knew exactly what to expect, and their engagement wasn't suffering because of it. Because the structure wasn't boring, the content inside it was good. That's the goal. Not endless variety, consistent structure with intentional quality content inside it. That's what sustainable secondary teacher strategies actually look like. So if I were walking back into the classroom today, knowing everything I know now, having spent 8 episodes laying out exactly what sustainable teacher planning looks like for multiple prep teachers, here's what I'd actually do. I wouldn't need to ask which teachers had the strongest structures. I've spent this entire series teaching them to you. But here's what I would do differently from day one. I would stop treating variety as the goal. I would pick a handful of structures, a few lesson routines, a few discussion protocols, a few activity formats I knew worked well, and I would use them consistently, on purpose, without apology. Not dozens of ideas, a few, done really well. Because here's the thing about repeatable structures that nobody in a curriculum meeting ever told me. When students know how a lesson works, when the shape is familiar, their cognitive energy goes toward the content instead of figuring out what's happening next. That's not boring. That's actually better conditions for learning. And for the teacher, when your lessons follow a consistent shape, planning gets dramatically lighter. You're not making a structural decision every time you sit down. You made them once. Now you're just filling in content. That's the permission I would give my year one self. Repeat your structures unapologetically. I want to leave you with an analogy that I keep coming back to because I think it captures the whole thesis of this series better than anything else I've said. For a long time, I thought good teaching looked like the Cheesecake Factory. Huge menu, unlimited options, something for everyone, endless variety. And look, the Cheesecake Factory is great. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But think about what it takes to run that kitchen. The complexity, the inventory, the training, the sheer number of decisions required to keep all those options available every single day. That's what over-planning feels like from the inside. Too many ideas, too many resources, too many possibilities. And eventually, like the cafe in Schitt's Creek, where nobody can figure out what to order because the menu is overwhelming, your brain just freezes. Now, think about those small restaurants with a rotating seasonal menu. 4 things done really well. Ingredients that overlap intentionally, a kitchen that runs efficiently because everyone knows exactly what they're making. That's what sustainable teacher planning looks like. Not a smaller version of the Cheesecake Factory, a completely different model. A few structures used really well, content that rotates inside a framework that stays consistent. That's it. That's the whole series in one analogy. I want to take a moment before we close to name what we've actually covered because I think it's easy to lose the thread across 8 episodes. In episode 334, we started with the belief shift. You don't need to plan everything before August. You need a repeatable starting point. In episode 335, we got specific how to choose your first unit based on leverage, not urgency or standards order. Episode 336 named the structural problem that elective teachers and CTE teachers face, being handed standards with no curriculum and being expected to teach anyway, while curriculum coaches and administrators assume that's enough. In episode 337, we talked about why collecting resources feels like planning, but isn't, and why clarity comes from building, not gathering. Episode 338 went into how the strongest teachers aren't the ones with the most variety. They're the ones with the most intentional, repeatable structures. Episode 339 introduced introduce, practice, produce as the framework that makes those structures travel across multiple courses. And last episode, 340, we talked about what all of this costs when you don't have it and what becomes possible when you do. Today is the permission to put it all together. Stop switching things up for the sake of it. Build something repeatable. Trust it enough to use again. Here's what I want you to walk away from this series believing. You do not need a different lesson for every class every day. You do not need to earn your rest by finishing everything first. You do not need to keep collecting until clarity magically appears. You need a starting point, a repeatable structure, and the confidence to use it across every course you teach without feeling like you're somehow doing it wrong, because you're not doing it wrong. You've been given advice by well-meaning people, including curriculum coaches like me, that was designed for a different kind of teacher than you are. And it's time to stop planning like a core content teacher with one prep and a provided curriculum. It's time to start planning like a multiple prep teacher you actually are, with systems built for your reality. Everything in the series, the framework, the unit planning process, the repeatable structures, the planning systems that travel across multiple courses, that's what Unit Planning Lab is built around. It's not a course full of resources to add to the pile you already have. It's a place actually to build something with other secondary teachers who understand multiple preps, singleton departments, and the particular exhaustion of doing curriculum design work on top of actual teaching. Because sometimes what you need most isn't another framework to think about. It's other teachers who get it and a structure that helps you finally finish something. If you've followed the series all the way through and you're thinking, I need help actually doing this, Unit Planning Lab is where that happens. The link is in the show notes. I want to say something before I let you go. This series was 8 episodes, and if you've been here for all of them, or even most of them, I want you to know that means something. You're not a teacher who's given up on figuring this out. You're a teacher who's still asking how to do it better, and that matters. You've been asked to do curriculum design work without curriculum design systems. You've been told to switch things up when what you actually needed was permission to repeat. You've been planning in silos when what you needed was a framework that travels. And none of that was your fault. But now you have something different, a starting point, a structure, and a whole series worth of permission to do things differently. Go build something that makes next year lighter, and then actually enjoy your summer. You've earned it. Grab the free secondary teacher planning calendar in the show notes. It's your starting point for everything we talked about in this series. And when you're ready to go deeper and build your first unit with support, Unit Planning Lab is waiting for you. Both links are in the show notes. Finish something that makes tomorrow lighter. I'll see you next time.